Hi everyone, Queeveen here from the comfort of my kitchen. In today's video, we are going to the dwarf planet Pluto, but also at the naming convention around planets, dwarf planets, asteroids, comets, or minor planets, major planets, and dwarf planets. There are different ways to talk about these objects, but we're going to start by looking at one of the objects that has changed definition. Which is Pluto. So Pluto is pretty much the only object whose definition has truly changed. Ceres is given the dual definition of being both a dwarf planet and an asteroid, whereas Pluto was considered a planet and is now considered a dwarf planet with no alternative. It's not a planet and a dwarf planet. But there is a problem with these terms. The word planet could mean a body which, of the sun, is large enough to become round under its own gravity or reach hydrostatic equilibrium, and also is in control of its orbit. So with Pluto here, Pluto is big enough to be round. It's got hydrostatic equilibrium. It orbits the sun, which isn't really a good part of the definition for reasons I will get to in a moment. Pluto is not in charge of its orbit. Although some objects do orbit Pluto, Pluto also shares its orbit with objects that do not orbit Pluto. And the orbit of Pluto indeed crosses the orbit of other objects, which are in some cases considered planets. Now, I don't want to say that any object that is considered a full planet needs to have all of the other objects that orbit the sun at the same distance to then orbit it. That would be a very cumbersome definition, and it would exclude things like the Trojan asteroids that occupy the Lagrange point of Jupiter, or Lagrange point of Jupiter, however you want to pronounce it. If we take a look at Pluto here, we're seeing it at 35 AU from the sun. Pluto isn't at opposition here, we're seeing it at 34. It's almost an AU less. It's close to opposition, but not quite there. If I get rid of the atmosphere, get rid of the ground, we'll be able to watch Pluto as we move around the sun, which will show some changes in Pluto's distance to the sun as well. So we're crossing over where it would form a triangle with the Earth. We'll keep pushing until we see it go up to about 36 AU, at which point it will be pretty much directly behind the Earth with respect to the, or directly behind the sun with respect to the Earth, somewhere around here. But we're seeing that Pluto's distance from the sun also varies quite a bit over the course of its orbit. And this is because Pluto's orbit is quite elliptical. All of the planets have elliptical orbits, but for the vast majority of the planets, the difference between their perigee and their apogee, or perihelion and aphelion, or perihelion and aphelion, depending on how you want to pronounce these things. These things are pretty subtle, whereas with Pluto, its eccentricity is such that there is quite a big difference between its closest position to the sun and its furthest position to the sun, to the point where Pluto's closest position to the sun is closer than Neptune's closest position to the sun, but its furthest is also significantly further. On Pluto down here, it's hundreds of Earth years. So we'll have to go through a long time here to see the variation between Pluto's perihelion and aphelion. But we can see here the difference in AU is just continuing to change. We're already at almost half of the distance between the Earth and the sun of a change, and it's only increasing. So it is an incredibly elliptical orbit, and that on its own isn't enough to disqualify Pluto as a planet. Planets can have elliptical orbits, and we've discovered planets around other stars that are unequivocally, undeniably planets, but whose eccentricity is quite great. So objects as big as Jupiter that orbit quite close to their sun can have highly eccentric orbits as well, as eccentric or even more eccentric than Pluto's. But Pluto is sharing its orbit with other trans-neptunian objects, other Plutinos and similar things, that orbit the sun at the same distance as Pluto, but completely independent gravitationally. We can see here that all of Pluto's moons are orbiting Pluto, and now that I've gone through a few years, we've gone from 2024 all the way up to 2028 here. It'll probably be close to 5 years by the time it is done, but we should see that AU tick over and go all the way up to 36 AU. There we go. So yeah, it took all the way until 2028, but there we go. It's back to 36 AU. And if I hop back to today, the date of recording, dropped right down to 35. So that's a difference of a full AU, and we didn't even cover the entirety of Pluto's orbit. So the full difference is even more extreme. We can call Pluto a dwarf planet, but I think it would almost be better if there was a different word for these objects that didn't contain the word planet. Asteroids and comets are often called minor planets, and the asteroid tracking and detection groups, they're often called minor planet groups. The Minor Planet Database takes care of tracking asteroids and comets and meteors. If we call everything that orbits the sun directly without orbiting something else in between, if we call everything that orbits the sun a planet, and it's either a minor planet like an asteroid or a comet, which are pretty much the same except for eccentricity, a full planet whereby it reaches hydrostatic equilibrium and is in control of everything that orbits gravitationally with it, everything that's at the same distance as the sun. And then we have dwarf planets that are almost like planets. You know, they orbit the sun just like minor planets, just like major planets. They have hydrostatic equilibrium just like major planets, but they're not in control of their orbit gravitationally like a minor planet. Dwarf planets would then be in between major planets and minor planets, and we would get a whole different word, not planet, for objects that do not orbit stars. Right now, rogue planets are objects that would be planets that orbit stars, or that don't orbit stars. Probably formed around a star. And then other extrasolar objects like Oumuamua, the object, I wonder if that is in my database actually, and I wonder if I'll have to type an Okina to find it. There we go. I don't have to type the Okina, but it does come up. So that little, it looks like an apostrophe, but it's not. That is the Hawaiian for a glottal stop. It's the Hawaiian grapheme for a glottal stop. These things get very awkward, but it's not Oumuamua, it's Oumuamua. I find it hard to do a glottal stop deliberately. We can see there, apparently right now, it might be updated, but that's 42 AU from the sun, 41 AU from the Earth. This is the object that passed through our solar system a couple of years ago, but did not actually orbit our sun. It passed through our solar system, it left our solar system, it was a visitor. It is not a member of our solar system. It's an interstellar object. And based on its size and shape, it would have been a minor planet if it was orbiting a star, like an asteroid or a comet. So we have these different usages of the word planet. Planet for most people means one of the big things that orbits the sun, and dwarf planets are usually seen as a subtype of that. There's planets, including dwarf planets. But if we instead have the more scientific, more astronomical, more pedantic definition of planet, whereby a planet is something that orbits the sun, and we have minor planets, asteroids and comets, we have major planets like Jupiter and Saturn and the Earth, and then we have dwarf planets like Pluto. As long as we see that the word planet really just means something that goes around the sun, then it's easy to see that dwarf planets and major planets and minor planets, they're all different categories of planet, and that's everything that orbits the sun. Whereas if we're using the usage planet, whereby planet is a major thing that orbits the sun, asteroids and comets aren't, and then dwarf planets are just a type of planet, that feels incorrect, because dwarf planets, and minor planets, asteroids and comets, they all occupy their own position, their own class of object orbiting the sun, as distinct classes from each other. There are minor planets, dwarf planets, and major planets. I think that if we're going to say that a planet is a major object orbiting the sun, and then we have asteroids and comets for the smallest objects, these objects like Pluto, that are not planets, that are not comets, that are not asteroids, they deserve their own word. Pluto, of course, is the most famous dwarf planet. It was the first object to be considered a dwarf planet, having been considered a planet when it was first discovered. Pluto does deserve its own special position, in history at least, but it is just one of a class of similar objects. The Earth gets a special position as a planet because it's our one, but it is just a planet among other planets. And Halley's Comet, it's probably the most famous, but it is just a comet among a class of comets. And then Ceres, the queen of the asteroid belt, is a special thing. I think that Pluto calling it a dwarf planet is fine, as long as we remember that being a dwarf planet by definition makes you distinct from a planet. And I think that Pluto should be named after a god, the god of the underworld, not the god of death, just the god of the underworld. Pluto should be the king of the dwarf planets, the first one discovered, even if we find, or the first one declared to be a dwarf planet, even if we discover other bigger ones, the same way that Ceres is the queen of the asteroid belt, Pluto should be the king of the dwarf planets, or the king of the trans-neptunian objects. At least maybe we'll find another monarch, another leader of the more distant, the scattered objects, the Oort cloud objects. We do still have a lot to discover out there. So that's a little bit about Pluto, a little bit about its eccentricity, but more so a video about the differences in definition and how these definitions, how the word planet can mean different things in different contexts and when it's associated with these other modifiers. So I do hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments what your opinions are. This is an opinion. I believe that this can be a little bit confusing. You let me know what you think in the comments below. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Feel free to visit my website, creepybeanscontent.ie, if you'd like to read some of this information. And make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel if you'd like to see more. And whatever else, I hope that I'll see you back here next time.